timely, very well needed.
Yeah.
Very much needed.
Could use a little more.
We could use more.
Mm-hmm.
We're still behind, but not as far behind as we were.
Yeah, well, that's true. I wanted to ask you this. I've got some lovely maple trees at the house, very big maple trees. One of them at the very top of the driveway, it's got a lot of bare branches. All of a sudden, it's generally always been a healthy tree, but a lot of bare branches at the very top of the tree. I'm wondering, because I wasn't looking before, did those leaves never come this year for that particular tree? Did it suffer some sort of calamity, or is the weather responsible for it not having leaves? Because the droughty conditions didn't really come until June, and we should have had leaves by then, right?
Yes, there should have been.
Yeah. So what's going on with this tree?
There were some delays in plants leafing out. So the buds opening and the leaves starting to develop this spring, which I usually start to look back in what's happened in the past. So we had that really cold snap Christmas week in December. That could be factoring into some of this because there were just a lot of plants. Some plants came out just fine this spring. And then there were other ones that, okay, what's going on? Why aren't the buds opening? Why aren't the leaves developing? And so it could go back to that. It could also go back, we need to go back a little farther in time. What were the weather conditions that happened last growing season? Did plants harden off enough in the fall? Did we have enough cool days and ample moisture for plants to, go into winter, prep themselves well enough to go into winter. That maybe that cold snap did more damage to buds and even wood than we might have thought it would.
Yeah.
And then this spring, there were plants that really didn't leaf out, or they leafed out late. So now they're under stress to begin with, and then we go into this last month and a half where we had less than ample moisture. We didn't have a lot of excess heat, but that moisture, when you're already under stress, that lack of it, as we go ahead and go through this season, will that affect those plants? They're just not able to adapt as well. And so we could see more effects of that in the future. But now you're seeing where, there's some dead branches up there possibly. And,
well, are they dead or?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. In each case, you kind of have to look at it and see, okay, did those plants actually leaf out and then they've since lost them? So did some of the storms or events, and even that dry spell was long enough that if things were a little weak to begin with, they could have lost those leaves. Now you should see some on the ground. Yeah. If you never saw them, if you never saw any falling to the ground and blowing around, then they probably, the tops of that tree those buds didn't open.
Yeah.
So there's probably dead wood up there, and we'll just have to see the extent of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does it leaf? Is the wood still alive? Will it send out some buds later? There'll be a delay in that, or is that dead and it's just drying down? And
I'll have to get binoculars and watch it because
you're not climbing up there to check that out. Snap some branches, see what's going on.
My days of climbing trees 50 feet up are probably over.
Probably done.
All right. Well,
unless you do it in a bucket and somebody takes you up there. Huh?
That's one thing. Another thing is the garden. The rain has been so beneficial to the garden. All the plants are standing up and saying thank you. But did the dry conditions harm their ability to produce fruit? Are my tomato plants going to look really good but not have tomatoes on them this year?
Well, you'll still get tomatoes as long as that plant continues to grow.
Yeah.
So if you were able to, well, there you go. So it's going to, it might have gotten delayed a little bit You know, that the plant might have shut down a little bit for a while there, trying to deal with the stress and not enough moisture. If you were able to water, you know, even a couple good drinks during that dry spell, you know, could have meant the difference between that plant surviving and it withering and having to replant.
Well, we did that. We used dehumidifier on them, water on them.
Okay.
Save the dehumidifier water. That's what the state is saying to do now. Save all your water and use that for watering your plants.
Yes, and that works. So just, getting things through, they might have slowed growth down a little bit. That could affect the yield later. But, you know, now things have gotten a drink, and we'll see what the future weather conditions hold for us here and see how things do. But, you know, as long as that plant is continuing to grow, and you can see new growth on it, and then it's going to flower, and then we'll go from there.
Put the zinnias in. Always border the garden with zinnias. And they always, I mean, they're really, really robust, and they come up and they're tall and they're absolutely beautiful. They never came up this year. Maybe now that the rain has come, they will, because they were put in dry weather and it never rained on them.
Yeah. So
dump some water on them, but those seeds they just sit in there, don't they? They don't.
Yeah, as long, you know, when there isn't enough moisture in the ground, as long as something else doesn't attack them, you know, and under those dry conditions, that seed, even if you plant it a little deep, can just sit there until it's able to take in enough moisture for that seed to start those processes of, you know, germination. So it could have just been there, and as long as some birds didn't come through and dig the seed out, and
they didn't do that.
And that happens. You know, sometimes we can, especially with corn seed and you know, others.
Yeah.
If they're there too long, if the birds, you know, the turkeys can come in, the crows can come in, and other birds can come in, and you may wonder, oh, why is that stand not all populated? And it could be because the birds came and visited and wanted to eat too, and took some of them. And sometimes they'll go right down the row, and there'll be literally nothing left.
Pluck them right out.
Yeah, you have to go in and reseed.
That's not the case with zinnias.
You know, and this is completely different. Right, on a dry year, that seed can be there. Probably nothing will happen to it until we get enough moisture to germinate. If we flip that and have a wet year, a lot of times when that ground's too moist, those seeds, if they're not able to germinate and it's too wet, they'll rot before they can germinate.
The one thing about zinnias is one zinnia flower produces hundreds of seeds, literally. So you save your buds, and I grow them from the same seeds every year, the seeds from the previous year's flowers, and so I really lay them in there pretty heavy. So the birds are going to be too fat to fly if they eat all those babies. All right.
So hopefully with a few days here, you'll see some things popping through the ground.
Yeah. All right. Got to get the peppers up there. The peppers just aren't responding so well. So maybe now with the rain, all of these things, you know, they start to respond a little bit better.
Yeah, and there's already, especially on transplants, there's always a little shock involved in that process of either, you know, when you grow plants from seed and then you might transplant them, you might start them, you know, just in a flat or tray, and then you kind of have to pull them apart, those little root systems apart, and you transplant them, you upsize them a size, and get them to the plant that you want to be able to plant outside. And, you know, each step of that way, there are stressors there. And then if we have them somewhat in a perfect environment where we're growing them, and then we subject them to the wind, you know, in a greenhouse or in your house in the basement under artificial light, those, you know, they're not getting the benefits of the wind, which helps strengthen those plant stems. So when we don't have that, we have to acclimate those plants to those outside conditions. Or the light levels might be borderline. Yes, we grew good plants, but can be a difference between that inside and just that natural light outside. So
unless Mother Nature has been helping them grow, Mother
Yes.
Nature can punch them in the mouth.
Yeah, so just taking them out of a perfect environment, perfect environment for the most part, and putting them outside to that perfect environment can stress those plants. And then just the act of popping them out of the cell trays, and depending on how long they've been in there, whether the roots, the root bound in there, if you've been holding them and waiting for better conditions outside to plant them, they can get root bound in there. Mm-hmm. And so then that's a stressor too. And then teasing those roots apart, getting them planted in the ground, there can be a delay. Those plants will just sit there and say, what's going on? Well, there's activity there. It's in the root system. They've got to get established, got to get those roots out into the ground. And once that happens, then they'll start to put on some growth. But there definitely can be delays there. All
right. So there you go. A little conversation with Bob Pollock from the Extension Service. It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com. Fox News is up next at the top of the hour, and then we visit with you from the WCCS newsroom with Josh. And in our next hour, a conversation with Dave Trevecki. Who's Dave Trevecki? Well, this is Dave Trevecki.